The Gamma K K61 Pro is definitely a statement piece. You know if this keyboard is for you after taking a single glance at it. Either you love the RGB insanity or you absolutely hate it. We're going to look at this keyboard both stock and after a couple mods to see how far you can get with a $90 keyboard. So this is the K61 Pro. If it looks familiar, it's because this is the newest version of the very popular Gamma K K61. Banggood did send this out for review, but all opinions are my own and I didn't get to see any part of this video before it went live. The first thing I'm going to address is the RGB. It's crazy bright, 22 types north facing per key and down firing LEDs, so it will light up your desk as well. Personally, at nighttime, I have to either turn the RGB off or dim it down considerably because it's just way too bright for me. The keycaps are now pudding keycaps to further increase the rainbow vomit effect, and they look a little different. The typeface is now in the upper left, similar to GMK's typeface, but much thinner, and the keycaps on the right just look a little off. I'm not too sure why. Unlike most pudding keycaps though, these have a decent thickness. Whilst the sound won't be as full as something like GMK or MT3 or SA keycaps, if you're into the RGB aesthetic, then these are probably the best pudding keycaps in terms of sound. There's also secondary legends I don't like as it throws off the aesthetic. I get why it's there, but I still don't really like it. Inside the box, you also get things like a manual, some accessories for modding and cleaning your keyboard, as well as a basic USB-C cable. Like most budget pre-builds, this keyboard can connect via wired, Bluetooth 5.0, and 2.4 GHz, with the dongle being stored in the case itself, which I really appreciate. The battery is 3100 mAh, and after some testing, my board went from 100% to 70% in about 3 or 4 hours with full RGB, so battery life would be around 10 to 15 hours. One of the main upgrades over the original K61 is that this keyboard is now gasket mounted. It now uses full-size silicone jackets. Admittedly, it's a little late to the trend, but better late than never. As for switches, I got the Gateron yellows, but the other options are Gateron reds, browns, and Gamma K's own Crystal, Phoenix, and Bumblebee switches, but those are only available on Gamma K's website. This board is hot swap with 5-pin support, which is pretty common nowadays, so it's nice to see. The stock experience with the yellows isn't too bad because this keyboard is packed full of foam. There's plate foam, a silicone sheet, and case foam. This, alongside the full-size silicone jackets and the overall muted nature of acrylic cases, leads to a very muted sounding board, which you'll hear in a sec. Like I said, it sounds pretty decent out of the box. Definitely reminds me of the sound signature of the PC75B, where it's very muted due to the plethora of sound dampening inside. If you're going for a muted sound signature, then I would probably recommend just looping these switches and stabs and calling it a day, as those are the definite weak points of this board. But I'm going to go for a louder, slightly poppier sound signature. So we're going to start by disassembling the whole board and taking off the switches and keycaps. The plate here is so flexible that I can literally pull out the whole plate and switches from the PCB. But it also meant that trying to remove the Gateron yellows from the plate was a little sketchy. There were times that I felt that I was going to crack or break the plate. It feels like one of those plastic rulers in school that you can bend to a certain degree, but if you go too far, then they'll just snap in half. The sound signature that I'm going for here is the opposite of muted. So the silicone sheet, plate foam, and case foam are out. The first thing I'm going to address is the stab. So I'll give them a fresh coat of XHT BDZ and 205 grade 0, as well as taping the stab inserts to reduce the clearance. I would recommend replacing these as they require a lot of tuning to get right. Luckily, these do support screw-ins if you want to, but I doubt many people will get something like Stabies for a board like this. No offense. Gateron yellows are a good budget switch, but I wanted to try out something different. These are lubed J-Wick yellows, which have a super good rep for a budget linear switch, so I decided to try these out. I would recommend getting a plate support fork or using the plate foam to install the switches, as this super flexible plate makes installing switches super difficult, as the plate constantly flattens against the PCB. But eventually I got the job done. Before reassembling, I'm going to apply 3 layers of tape mod while keeping in mind to avoid covering the underglow LEDs. This is just an OP mod in general, especially in a muted case like this, but my advice is to look into the risk of tape modding with a battery. My current understanding is that there's a chance for an electrical fire which will brick your board, and potentially much worse. I could totally be wrong, but it's better safe than sorry. I'm doing this because I don't really care what happens to this board. You can easily substitute it with something like switch pads or tripods for a close enough result. If you still want a tape mod, at least go with a non-conductive tape like electrical tape. Anyways, we're going to add the Bluetooth switch onto the bottom case, then reassemble the board and top it off with these ducky cotton candy keycaps. I do have a review of these keycaps up if you're interested, but that review is almost a year and a half old and it's probably a really embarrassing watch today. I will still leave it in the top right if you're interested. These keycaps will reduce the per key RGB as they aren't backlit, which is what I'm going for since I'm mostly in it for the underglow. And these keycaps will also give a slightly deeper, poppier sound, especially in the spacebar. Take a listen. So I think this board came out pretty good. It's still very much muted because of the acrylic case and plate, but there isn't a whole lot more that's able to be done to accentuate the character of the keycaps or the switches other than something drastic like PE foam. I haven't used SA in almost a year, so it feels really nice to remount this set. I definitely prefer MT3 due to the more pronounced grooves, but SA is probably where I'd recommend people start in terms of a high profile set. These stabs also turned out pretty good, but they required a lot of TLC with the SA keycaps, which for some reason brought out a lot more rattle and tick compared to when I tested them with the pudding keycaps. I ended up having to relube the stabs twice and add 3 more layers of tape in the cutouts as these stabs always tick after just a few hours after relubing. Definitely a good candidate for replacing then. In terms of game performance, it's great. The N key roller makes it great for FPS. Not too sure on the polling rate since it isn't specified though. The wireless connectivity is decent. It does take a couple of attempts to connect the keyboard in both Bluetooth and 2.4 GHz, but once it's connected, it's rock solid. No issues from me. The board has a decent amount of flex and has a very soft bottom feel due to the acrylic plate having little to no structural integrity, but this flex is definitely one that you only feel when demonstrating it on camera, not so much in regular use. I think that for $90 you get a pretty decent keyboard. I would like to see this board offered in a bare bones option for $50 or $60 to incentivize people to mod, as the stock experience leaves a lot to be desired for some enthusiasts. The stabs have a whisper of factory loop. I would have liked to at least have seen the inclusion of the Gateron G Pro switches instead of regular Gateron switches, since those are at least consistently factory lubed. In the defense of this board though, the Gamma K switches are pre-lubed. I haven't tried them out yet though. Overall, if you're wanting a keyboard that gives the same vibes as an acrylic tofu but you're on a budget, with a little time and effort you can get a pretty good sound and feel out of this $90 keyboard. It's hard not to recommend this board if you're looking for an RGB galore keyboard on a budget, as it's a very niche product, and as far as I know the only competition in the same price range is just Gamma K's other keyboards and the Acco ACR boards. I haven't tried the latter though, aside from the Alice, so I can't speak as to which is better. But let me know if there's a hidden gem of a budget RGB keyboard that I haven't seen yet. I'll keep you guys posted in the pinned comment below. The fact that this is gasket mounted does push this board above the rest in terms of features, but the muted sound signature of the case may push some people away, especially those wanting a deeper, thockier sound in their board. In that case, something like the LK67 will work better at around the same cost, as long as you're willing to give up that RGB aesthetic. Honestly though, this aesthetic has started to grow on me and it's beginning to be a little addicting to look at. I'll leave links to everything in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.